Imagine one of your friends throwing a party with more than 30 people there. Some you know well, some you barely know, but everyone is there for a reason. Everyone was invited. Everyone belongs there, except one person. Somewhere inside this house is a complete stranger who managed to walk into a private party without being invited, blend in with everyone, and stay there for hours without anyone realizing he didn't belong. He talked to people, he learned their names, he moved around the house, and because everyone assumed somebody else knew who he was, nobody really questioned him, until one person finally did. And what she found upstairs turned what had started as a weird party story into something much more disturbing. This is one of the strangest and most interesting Reddit posts I've come across in a long time. So let's see exactly what happened, and then I will give you my thoughts on who this guy probably was, why I think he was there, and just how easily he managed to get inside. I live in a college city that is also near a lot of amusement parks and tourist areas. The cities on the outskirts have entire gated communities filled with huge vacation rentals. Some of these houses are basically mansions with pools, game rooms, theaters, and more bedrooms than anybody would realistically need. A couple of months ago, one of my friends rented one of those villas for the weekend and threw an end of semester party. It wasn't an open party posted online or anything like that. She invited her friends and some of her cousins around our age, and everyone was allowed to bring a few people. I went with my boyfriend. At the busiest point, there were probably 30 to 40 people spread throughout the house. Some people were outside by the pool, some were drinking in the kitchen, and other people were in the game room. There was also a theater upstairs that people kept going in and out of. A smaller group of us planned on spending the night, so people had overnight bags, purses, chargers, and blankets lying around. Most people were still planning to leave later. I first noticed this guy maybe an hour or two into the party. He looked around our age, probably early 20s. There was nothing about him that immediately stood out. He was dressed normally, talking to people, and acting completely comfortable. I assumed he came with one of my friend's cousins because I had never met all of their friends. I remember seeing him talking to my boyfriend and some other guys near the game room. When I walked over, he joined the conversation like he already knew everybody. He even knew a couple of people's names, so I didn't question it. The first time someone asked me who he was, it was honestly funny. One of my friends pulled me aside and asked me if I knew who he was, and I told her I thought he came with one of our friend's cousins. We were all drinking, so it became a joke for a while. People kept asking each other who invited him, but nobody seemed seriously concerned. Eventually, someone said they remember seeing him walk to the front door with a group that had gone outside to get drinks and other things from their cars. When somebody finally asked that group, they said they didn't know him either. They remembered him walking inside directly behind them, but they thought he had already been at the party and had just gone outside for a minute. One of them had held the door open for him without thinking about it. At that point, we were all laughing like, so who the hell is this man? It was weird, but there were so many people there that we still thought there had to be an explanation. Maybe the person who invited him was outside. Maybe they had already left. Maybe one of the drunk people there had invited somebody and forgotten. He wasn't standing in a corner staring at people or doing anything that screamed danger. He was social, played games with people, and moved around the party like everyone else. At one point, I was standing near a conversation where he commented on how big the house was. He said something like, "There's so many rooms, but there's also mad people here. Where is everybody even going to sleep?" It didn't seem like a weird question because people were already talking about who was staying and who was leaving. Someone explained that only a smaller group was spending the night. A few couples had bedrooms, and some people would probably sleep in the theater because it had large reclining seats. The theater was the main reason anybody was going upstairs during the party. People had been watching music videos and hanging out in there throughout the night, so nobody really paid attention to who was going up or coming back down. This is where I think the story becomes interesting for a reason that has nothing to do with the stranger looking suspicious. Because he didn't. That's actually what makes this work so well. There are 30 or 40 people in the house. People are drinking, moving between rooms, and coming and going. Nobody is realistically keeping track of every face. So when someone notices this guy, the natural assumption is that he belongs to somebody else. The author assumes he came with one of her friend's cousins. Then, the group he followed to the door assumes he was already at the party. And suddenly everybody has a reasonable explanation for his presence, even though nobody can actually identify him. That's a surprisingly effective way to blend into a crowd. You don't necessarily need a convincing story if you can make everyone else tell themselves one. There's also that question about the house. At the time, asking where people are going to sleep sounds completely harmless, but knowing what happens later, I think it's worth remembering. He was asking about the size of the house, the number of people there, and where everyone would be sleeping. That could have been nothing more than normal conversation, and we shouldn't pretend we know what was going through his head. But if he was there to steal, that kind of information would obviously be useful. And this is where I want to let the original story continue, because the next part is where the situation stops being merely strange. Later that night, one of my friends got way too drunk. Another friend helped her upstairs and put her in one of the bedrooms so she could sleep it off. That room was also being used by a few people who were staying overnight, so there were bags and other things inside. My friend left the bedroom door open because people were going to be going in and out, and so anyone passing by could check on her. A little while later, the same friend who had helped her upstairs went back to make sure she was okay. The bedroom door was almost completely shut. She knew she had left it open, but at first she assumed someone had closed it because of the noise downstairs. When she opened the door, the guy was inside the room alone with our friend. Our friend was still passed out on the bed. Her purse was open near her, and the guy was standing by the nightstand holding her phone. My other friend immediately asked him what he was doing. He said the phone had been ringing and he was trying to figure out who it belonged to. Then he said he had heard someone throwing up earlier and wanted to make sure she was okay. My friend told him he didn't even know her and had no reason to be alone in the bedroom with her, especially with the door basically closed. He kept saying she was misunderstanding the situation and that he was only trying to help. The arguing woke our drunk friend up enough for her to look at him and ask who he was. My other friend started yelling downstairs, asking who brought him and telling whoever he came with that they both needed to leave. People started coming upstairs and gathering in the hallway. At first, everyone expected somebody to step forward and calm him. Literally nobody did. This is the first moment where I would personally stop thinking of him as just a weird party crasher. Finding him alone in a bedroom is already strange. Finding him there with an unconscious woman with her purse open and her phone in his hand is a completely different situation. His explanation is possible. Maybe he really did hear someone was sick and thought he was helping. But there are too many things that make it uncomfortable. He doesn't know her, nobody knows him, the bedroom door was almost completely shut, and he's standing beside an unconscious person's open purse. What really stands out to me though is what happens when people come upstairs. You would expect someone to say, "Oh, he's with me," or at least recognize him. Instead, nobody does. And now the stranger has a problem that he can't really talk his way out of. There isn't a single person in the house who can confirm that he's supposed to be there. Let's see how he responds when he's finally confronted directly. One of my friend's boyfriends is a lot more confrontational than the rest of us. He walked up to the guy and directly asked who he came with. The guy said the people he knew had already left. My friend's boyfriend asked for their names. He gave one first name, but nobody knew who he was talking about. Then he said he might have gotten the person's name wrong because they had only recently met. Someone pointed out that earlier he had acted like he knew one of my friend's cousins. He said we had misunderstood him. According to him, he never said he knew them. He only said he had been hanging around with that group during the party. My friend's boyfriend told him nobody there knew him, so he needed to leave. What really bothered me was just how calm the guy stayed. He didn't get angry, embarrassed, or nervous. He just shrugged and said something like, "My bad, I thought it was an open party. It's not that serious." Then he walked downstairs and for a few seconds everyone just stood there. He acted so casual that it almost made us feel like we had overreacted and accidentally kicked out some confused drunk person. This reaction is one of the details I find the strangest. If you are caught inside a private party and suddenly 30 people are asking who you are, most innocent people would probably be embarrassed, confused, or at least nervous. This guy apparently stays calm enough to simply shrug it off and that actually works in his favor for a moment because it makes everyone question whether they've just overreacted. Maybe he really was just some drunk guy who thought it was an open party. Except the story isn't finished, because the second he leaves, they start checking their belongings. Then the friend who had been sleeping checked her purse. Some of her cash was gone. That was when everyone started checking their belongings. Someone couldn't find their car keys. Another girl's wallet was missing. Somebody else couldn't find their AirPods. A group of us started searching the house. When they checked the theater upstairs, someone opened the storage compartment inside one of the reclining seats. There were several things inside that clearly didn't belong together. There were 2 wallets, a set of car keys, AirPods, a watch, loose cash, and a couple pieces of jewelry. 2 driver's licenses had been removed from the wallets and placed at the bottom of the compartment. Both IDs belonged to the girls who were at the party. Everything belonged to different people and had been taken from different places around the house. One person had left her wallet in the kitchen. The car keys had been on a table near the pool door. The AirPods had been inside the jacket in the game room. Nothing technically left the house because he was confronted before he could take it. But someone had gathered all of it and hidden it inside the theater. And this is where, at least to me, the mystery becomes much easier to understand. The stranger didn't just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. There is now a stash of valuables hidden upstairs, and the belongings belong to several different people. Wallets, keys, AirPods, cash, jewelry, even driver licenses. And they weren't all taken from the same room. They had been collected from different parts of the house and brought together. We still have to be careful here. The author herself says they couldn't prove that he moved every single item. So I wouldn't present that as an established fact. But if we put the pieces together, the thief theory becomes extremely convincing. He had been moving around the house for hours. He had been upstairs multiple times, and he had just been found in a bedroom with someone's phone and an open purse. If he was stealing, I think the theater compartment makes perfect sense as a temporary stash. He could collect things throughout the night and come back for them later, rather than walking around the party carrying everything at once. And there's another possibility that I find even more interesting. While he was talking to people and moving around, he may have been learning the house. Who was drunk, who was living, who was staying overnight, which rooms were occupied, and where people were leaving their things. We can't know that was happening, but if this was intentional, his behavior suddenly looks a lot less random. And fortunately for everyone in that house, they caught him before anything actually left the property. But now there's a question that still needs an answer. How did he get inside in the first place? We couldn't prove that he had moved every single item, but he had just been found alone in a bedroom holding our friend's phone with her purse open beside him. People also started remembering that he had gone upstairs multiple times throughout the night. Nobody thought anything of it because the theater was up there and people had been coming and going. I know people are probably going to ask why we didn't immediately contact the police. There were a lot of people drinking at the party, including people who should not have been. Everyone was worried the police would show up, treat him like a regular party crasher, and focus more on everything happening at the house. Nobody wanted my friend to get in trouble or lose the rental. In hindsight, we probably still should have called. Since the house was under my friend's name, she contacted the property manager and resort security. The rest of us only know what happened afterward, though the updates she gave us. The house had a camera facing the front entrance, and the community had security's cameras throughout. The front camera showed the group we remembered coming back from their cars. The guy was walking towards the house alone several feet behind them. Right before they reached the door, he sped up and fell into step with them. When one of the people held the door open, he walked inside without saying anything. The group thought he was already with us. Everyone inside thought he had come with them. This is probably my favorite part of the entire story, because the security footage explains exactly why this worked. There was no elaborate break-in. He didn't force his way through the gate, he didn't break a window, and he didn't need a stolen key. He simply walked behind a group of people. Then, right before they reached the door, he sped up and joined them. Someone held the door open, and he walked inside. That's it. The people outside assumed he was already with the group. The people inside assumed he had come in with them. And because both sides made the same assumption, nobody ever actually verified who he was. I think this also changes how I interpret his behavior earlier in the night. If his goal really was to steal, then his confidence makes a lot more sense. He wasn't trying to convince everyone with some complicated story. He was relying on the fact that people generally don't question someone who behaves like they are belonging there. And there's something else I want to point out here. The author says he had been walking around the community before entering the villa. So now we know he wasn't simply teleported into the situation. He was already in the area, and at some point he found an opportunity to get inside. Was that opportunity completely spontaneous, or was he looking for somewhere he could be landed into? The post doesn't give us enough information to know, but the footage is about to tell us more about what happened afterwards. Security found more footage of him walking around the community before he entered our villa. They couldn't figure out how he originally got through the gate. He wasn't connected to my friend's reservation, and there was no guest pass under his name. From what the property manager told my friend, they checked with the nearby villas he had been seen around and contacted the relevant renters or property managers. Nobody recognized him or claimed he was their guest. The property manager was apparently furious with the resort because the community advertised itself as heavily secured. Somehow a random person had gotten through the gate, wandered around the neighborhood, and walked into a rental without being stopped. For a few weeks, my friend didn't hear anything else. Then the property manager contacted her again. Security had stopped the same guy inside the resort on another occasion. I don't know exactly what he was doing that time, but he wasn't staying there and wasn't listed as anybody's approved guest. They checked his identification and connected him to the footage from our party. His name wasn't common, so my friend looked him up. She found a Facebook profile that matched him and then found court records and an older local article. He had previously been convicted of theft. He had also been arrested for breaking into a home in a neighborhood nearby property and taking wallets, electronics, and other belongings. I don't know what legally happened after our incident. My friend was told the footage and information were given to law enforcement, and that he was permanently banned from the resort. Since nothing actually left the house, I'm not sure whether he was ever charged for what happened at our party. And this is the part that really confirms my suspicion about what he was doing there. The post doesn't leave us with a completely mysterious stranger anymore. According to the author, security later connected him to previous theft and a burglary case involving wallets, electronics, and other belongings. So, while we can't know exactly what was going through his head that night, the simplest explanation is probably the right one. He saw an opportunity and intended to steal. I also don't think this necessarily means he arrived that night with some elaborate plan specifically targeting this party. In fact, I think it may have been much simpler. He was already inside the resort or somewhere nearby. He saw a large group of people entering a huge rental, realized nobody was checking who belonged there, and he decided to take advantage of it. Once inside, the environment was almost perfect for someone like him. Dozens of people, alcohol, multiple rooms, belongings left unattended, and people constantly moving around. He could disappear to the crowd while figuring out where everything was. The darker possibility is that while he was talking to people, he wasn't just making friends. He may have been assessing the environment, who was paying attention, who was drunk, which rooms were occupied, and where the valuables were. Again, that is my interpretation, not something the post proves. But when you look at everything that happened, I think it is a reasonable possibility. And luckily, whatever his original plan was, he didn't get the chance to finish it. I still think about how easily he got inside. He didn't force his way through the gate or break into the house. He just walked behind a group of people and let everyone make assumptions for him. He stayed for hours. He talked to us, learned people's names, and heard that some of us planned on sleeping there. Had my friend not gone back upstairs when she did, I don't know how long he would have stayed or what else he would have done. The scariest part is that if nobody had questioned him, he probably would have spent the night in that house with us. And honestly, I think that last sentence is what makes this story so unsettling. The theft itself is disturbing, but the thought of a complete stranger spending the night inside the house full of people who had no idea who he was is much worse. The most interesting part to me is how little effort it actually required. He didn't need a disguise or fake invitation. He didn't need to convince everyone of an elaborate lie. He just followed the group to a door and acted like he belonged. And everyone else thought he probably is someone else's friend. That assumption gave him hours. Luckily, someone eventually questioned him before he could leave with the things he'd collected, and before the situation had had a chance to become something much worse. But now I'm curious what you think. Do you believe he was simply a thief who saw an opportunity? Or do you think there was something more deliberate about the way he infiltrated the party? And if you were there and noticed this guy for the first time, would you have been suspicious? Or would you have assumed exactly what everyone else did, that he was somebody else's friend? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.